The moon. The moon hangs there every night like it knows something we don't. A silent witness to everything we've ever been: wars, prayers, first loves, and last goodbyes. We've mapped its surface, walked its dust, planted flags and instruments, and still it keeps its secrets. Why does it sit at the exact distance and size to perfectly eclipse the sun? A cosmic coincidence so precise it feels intentional. Why does the same face always stare back at us, never turning, never blinking? And how did something so large, so influential, end up exactly where it needed to be to shape our tides, our seasons, even the rhythm of life itself? For centuries, the moon has been blamed for madness, worshipped as a god, feared as an omen. It pulls at the oceans, but maybe it pulls at us too. Our sleep, our myths, our imagination. We call it a dead rock, yet it controls the living earth in ways we still don't fully understand. We went there and came back, and somehow the question grows larger and larger instead of smaller, because the greatest mystery of the moon isn't what it's made of. It's why it feels like it's always meant to be there, watching us, waiting, while we slowly try to remember what we once knew when we first looked up and wonder.
What do you see when you're in the dark?
Welcome to Buried Stories. I'm Jeff Mercurio. Today we got Steve Mercurio. Steve, hello, how are you? Welcome.
What's up, man? I'm here again. Glad to be back. Great show. Look forward to it.
With me is Wendell Brown. Wendell, how are you?
Hey Jeff, I'm great. Interesting topic tonight. I hope we didn't bite off more than we could chew, because it's one of those things that nobody has an answer to. But I'm really interested in the moon, and I appreciate you guys talking about it tonight, because recently I've seen a couple theories on it. I always believed the collision one, where something hit our planet, would explain why our planet is all dug out and it's only a quarter or three-quarters Earth type material. The rest is ocean. Explains that. And then the debris from the collision coalesced, I guess, over time and formed our moon. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. That's the prevailing theory. That's the accepted scientific theory. And it's really hard to debunk that. I mean, it's logical. But you hear there is also theories that the moon was placed there by something, whether it be God or whether it be some other source. So I was interested in talking about the moon simply to kind of ping pong this back and forth, because I really don't know. My belief's been shaken a little bit, with the hollow moon theory and everything. It's been shaken a little bit in just the perfection of the moon. Um, I really lean towards it's just God's work, because it's so perfect, and we don't survive here without it. Um, but the hollow moon theory's been in the news a lot, and about how all the craters are the same depth and things, and we never see the dark side of the moon. So, um, who knows what's on the dark side of the moon? Could be a big garage door on the other side of the moon. We don't know. And that's where all these things, because I see a lot of the probes are the spheres, and I think even the saucers and things. Surely they have to be some kind of probes sent just to gather information. It's what we would do. It's what we're doing now to other planets. So, um, but that being said, I'm just interested in your theories on what's your prevailing theory on the moon? Is it that simple a result of a collision? Because, there's 62 moons around Jupiter, there's one around our Earth, and it's basically another planet. It's much larger than moons around other planetary bodies. So, it's enormous, but it's the perfect size. It's, the perfect distance, you know, and think of the coincidence that it has to be for the Earth to be in the Goldilocks zone of the sun, and how it has to be the perfect distance out. And then you got to do a twofer. Then the moon has to be the same in relationship to the Earth for us to be here. It is mind-boggling. I can't get my head around it. I don't think it's a hollow moon. A lot of the hollow moon theory comes from the Apollo astronauts going and like throwing their uh, what are they, the rockets back to the moon, and then them listening to the vibrations. I have a hard time with the moon landing, so I can't really make that my premise that the moon's hollow because they heard these echoes, because I'm not sure they went to the moon. So I'm still working on that one. So the hollow moon theory from the get-go is kind of, yeah, to me, it's kind of questionable. But it is an interesting theory that if it is hollow, that might explain why it doesn't spin. I would think if it had a core, it would spin like everything else out in space. But here we go. So, Jeff, I'll start with you. We'll pass it over to Steve. What is your prevailing theory of the origins of the moon?
None of us were around when the Big Bang Theory happened, regardless of whether you think God spoke everything into the world or, you know, it exploded into being. So, with that being said, there had to be a lot of collisions going on with masses going out and ping ponging off each other to get in a certain place. So, I don't know if something, well, I do agree something may have hit the Earth in its infant stage, which spun off some material that coalesced into the moon that we see now. So I don't really have a theory that it's an interplanetary or another planet, Narubu, hit it and, you know, swirled a bunch of Earth material and it ended up being the moon. But I do believe that something did hit it during its initial birthing stage of the universe. So that's where I come from on it.
How about you, Steve?
Yeah, but I mean, my thoughts on are that, you know, after this, I think that this is just it's South material from it could be from our piece of the earth, the, you know, outer space, but yeah, I'm kind of with the science on this one. Whole that essentially created over billions of years. You know, could have been when we were infant, could have been when the Earth had been around for billions of years, and then that sort of impact helped create the moon. But ultimately, I'm kind of with the science on this. I do think that that's how essentially created.
Do you guys think a lot of the ancient stories about there was a time when the moon wasn't up in the sky? Do you believe those? Or not believe them? Do you give them any credibility? Could they be true that the Earth existed without the moon at some time? I can't imagine what Earth would be like without it. But again, I'm only going by what the scientists tell me the moon does. I'm assuming it would be total hell on Earth without the moon controlling things. But but what do you think? Some of the stories where a lot of the ancient stories talk about a time when they looked up and the moon wasn't there.
Now, as I go, and this is my own personal belief, is this writing and it would have to be so ancient that none of our scientists can interpret it whatsoever. So if they're just
Good point.
looking off of hieroglyphs or something like that, you can interpret any way you want, you know? So I don't buy that they say there was a time there was no moon and that they say they truly know. But I can say that if there was no moon, that the there would be a lot of catastrophes on Earth because the moon has so much power on everyday life here on Earth. But I just can't believe them saying that they could positively say that there was a time where Earth didn't have a moon because nobody could read it.
Steve?
Yeah, I agree with that too, Wendell. I can't think of a time. I mean, I would assume that based on kind of the science of the moon, that we're going back billions of years for a not. I mean, way before life created. Because think about if you were that because life, life is given on Earth, meaning you need the moon for life to exist on Earth because of how it essentially controls or manipulates the Earth life on Earth, and then I think it kind of defeats the argument that we would have had hope at a time that the moon wouldn't have existed. So I don't think that I when you interpret that kind of stuff, what specifics we're looking back early man and language, I think that there could be some explanation, episode of, of guy, different able to explain why maybe they had perceived time periods where they may not have been able to perceive the moon, but I don't think there's ever been a time with life on Earth that we haven't had the moon there.
Why do you guys think it doesn't spin? Or go ahead, Jeff. What do you have?
All right, let me back up for one moment. Now, if you go with the Genesis story, and let me walk back to a time that there perhaps may have not have been the moon in the sky. The Genesis story is basically God created the earth and there was waters over the earth. So there's water. We were a water planet at one time. No mention that there was a celestial moon in our sky. So maybe during creation, it went from water to, the moon being created by him at that time. And that's where you get some earth changes and tidal changes that would separate the water from land and so on and so forth. That's the only thing I could think of that really makes any sense where the moon didn't exist at a certain time.
Why do you think it doesn't spin?
Actually, it does rotate,
Well,
but
you
it's
can
As it go
remember.
as
go
it
ahead.
goes around?
Is this something you guys remember? I mean, this is back in elementary school. You had the little like the 9 planets, you had the solar system, and you would hand crank it, and then they would have the model as you cranked it all the okay. I don't know
Yeah.
why. I kind of remember that in the model that they had the moon spinning. Okay. But I mean, kind of going back to why I mean, I guess kind of the prevailing theory is that it's so old that eventually, like scientists say, the Earth will stop spinning. Now, granted, it'll be a long time from now, but I think that that's just kind of a sign of the age. Whereas the moon just doesn't turn anymore; that it kind of follows its face facing towards the Earth. But that would be my theory: is that it's just so old that it just stops spinning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we look at it a lot, and we look at it as a static event, and it's actually the continuation of an explosion. And, so things change, but, and, the Earth is slowing down. The moon's actually getting further from the Earth. It gets 1.5 centimeters a year. It gets
Yeah,
further
yeah.
away. And I wonder what it, 2 large bodies. I wish I knew more about gravity. Um, just from the context of the 2 large bodies attract each other, and what keeps them from colliding, 1, And then just things like if we did go to the moon, and you know how they do that, they talk about that rocket shot around the moon, use the moon's gravitational
Yeah.
properties to slingshot around the moon.
Yeah.
Well, what if it, I don't know, I would think spinning would be needed for that, but maybe not. Maybe it's just the mass of the moon that causes the
No.
gravitational
Right. I mean,
pull.
it's got its own gravitational pull as well as the Earth, so it's in tidal lock that they're attracted to each other. Now, as you were saying, the moon is getting further and further away, and eventually at some point in time, because the moon helps our core spin, which helps keep everything stable. It's going to get to a certain point where it gets further away, where the core starts spinning slowly or slower, which will slow the rotation and it'll start wobbling on its axis and causing all kinds of havoc. But the magnetism between each other is so mathematically perfect right now that it keeps the solar flares away. It's been keeping other masses from hitting us because you could look. That's one scarred satellite we got in the night sky. So I mean, it's kind of incredible. It's just a mathematical like phenomena that I'm not a mathematician, but numbers don't lie. It's perfect.
Yeah, maybe it's a time clock too. In the end, it will eventually be a time clock because it's 1.5 centimeters now a year, but maybe one year
Yeah,
it'll be a foot, maybe it'll be 2 foot. And
yeah.
and I didn't, its orbit is a circle or geocentric or whatever they call it and everything, but I don't think it's the same distance. It has an average distance uh, of like 238,000 miles from the Earth, but at times it gets to 274,000 miles
No,
away from the Earth
yeah.
in some of its orbits. So, um, gosh, I hope it don't go slinging off sometime. That'd be a problem. But
That
I
would
can
be
understand
a big
that would,
problem.
that will eventually stop the Earth from spinning.
Oh yeah.
Well, you guys brought up some good points early on in this conversation. Number one, you brought up Wendell, you brought up the Goldilocks zone, right? I mean, the fact that kind of the Earth, as we look at it, is a good distance from the sun, which therefore
Mhm.
allows for life. We kind of look at other galaxies. We look for other planets that we consider in the Goldilocks zone. So here's the question I would have for you guys about the moon. We've all only in our lifetime and our species, we've only known the Earth to have the moon. Therefore, our assumption is that we need the moon to survive for all the reasons you guys had already discussed, right? The gravitation, the waves. Jeff, you brought up the sun spots and everything else and whatnot. My question to you is this: when I hear them talk about planets in the Goldilocks zone, I wonder if they ever refer to whether or not can they tell that those planets that they're talking about referring to be within that Goldilocks zone, do those planets have a moon? Number one. And then my other question on top of that is, let's say that planet Earth never had the moon. And instead of kind of transforming itself over these billions of years to have the moon, therefore, that's how kind of it was brought up in its upbringing of a planet, right? Would it have been similar, different, or whatnot had we just not had the moon? Like we assume that our life wouldn't exist, but how about if it just kind of evolved differently without the moon over those billions of years? We'd still technically have water, we assume. We'd still technically have land and all of that. Just kind of two interesting questions about this.
Do you guys think we're an accident? Just us being here. Do you think we're? I wouldn't think you would if you have your religious beliefs, uh,
No, so you
but
know where I stand on that.
do you think we're an accident? because, well, like I said, the way we talk and we could try to connect some dots, whether they're solid or not, who knows? But, you know, just like I said, I really like the hollow moon theory. It explains a lot. Explains a lot of the short shuttle runs for UFOs and probes and stuff, and to me. And maybe we can talk about Zeta Reticuli sometime, because that's the closest place there that they think everything's coming from. But, um, but if, like I said, my premise was faulty, if I don't believe we could go to the moon, and I don't know if you were on here, Steve, when I was talking to Jeff before, it just really throws my mind. We have a problem getting 300 miles away from the Earth, but we zipped 275,000 miles on a trip 10 times without a problem. Now, the argument is the ships they build today aren't designed to go out. I always say, why didn't the space shuttle go to the moon? Or at least go around it, take a tour, go around it. It wasn't built for it. What are you talking about? It wasn't built for it. But it wasn't. It simply was not built for it. But it's just not logical to me, because you could have equipped the space shuttle to do what the little Coke can did, but they didn't. And so we have a problem when it gets up to like 350 miles. I think is the max that we've gotten out there with one of the shuttle runs, and it was a really big deal. But we go 275,000 miles away. We're scared to go 300, little antsy about it, but we had no problem just cruising 275,000 miles. So I don't want to argue the moon landing now, but my point being is my premise was faulty on the hollow moon, because if they didn't go there, and that's where a lot of that data comes from for the hollow moon theory, then I don't think they dumped anything down there and heard an echo. So that's kind of out the door. So that leaves me with really two theories in my mind that make sense. One is the global collision, and everything just formed perfectly. Steve, you just brought it up again, the Goldilocks zone. We not only had to have one miracle, we got two. The Earth's perfect distance from the sun, and then the moon's perfect distance and size from the Earth. 3, if you want to throw in size. So 3 miracles. And talking about miracles, it leads me to my other theory that I think is stronger than any of them, that we're not an accident, and it was set up for us. Our minds can't comprehend how, but it's perfect for us. Or do you guys believe that we're just an accident and this is just how it is, and we have evolved how we've evolved? What do you think?
Well, going back to kind of your Earth is hollow, or the moon is hollow theory. I was doing a little bit of reading about that, just to try to understand, because we've all kind of heard the stories about how the moon has rang like a bell, and so I was trying to take a look back at that to try to understand what did that statement mean. One of the things, that articles that I read about it was talking about how it didn't technically like ring like a bell. It was more of how it resonated or whatnot. And they said some of those resonant sounds, or those kind of hallowed sounds, some of them lasted up to 3 hours. That it was just spouting out this noise. Now, granted, I don't think it's really a noise you'd hear with your with our ears or whatnot, but rather with whatever sophisticated equipment. But I do find that interesting, and part of what they kind of talked about was, the moon doesn't have water. It doesn't have the layers of soil that essentially would kind of like an earthquake. It kind of takes that force away. When you have water and you have layers of soil and all of that stuff kind of takes that force as part of it. Whereas they said a lot of times that the reason the moon would resonate like that is it doesn't have the layers of soil. It doesn't have anything. It literally is like bone almost. Like it just resonates that noise constantly until it settles down. Um, so I mean, going back to that, I mean, look, could it be hollow? I do think that there are probably caves, which kind of leads me. I mean, look at Earth. We have plenty of caves a lot of them we don't even have a clue. There's underground water sources. There's, all sorts of layers of underground kind of gaps that we're not even aware of. So I would assume that there are definitely some of those on the moon as well as it was coming back together. I don't think it's just one solid mass. I think there's plenty of holes in it. Obviously, we see the craters and everything. So, um, you know,
Well, not only that, but back to your point that it had to be spinning at one point. If all that stuff coalesced from the explosion, if you're following that theory, the collision theory, then it had to be spinning in order to impact it, in order to bring it together. Wouldn't you think?
yes,
If I don't think it all just floated out there, because if it never was spinning, all the little particles that put the moon together would be coming around the Earth as little particles still. They wouldn't be in one ball, except for whatever, the why is a soap bubble round? Because it's the easiest form to take in the universe. That's why a soap bubble is round. And that's why our planets are round. And that's why I think the universe has got to be round. What's outside of it, who knows? But there's something to the round thing. And otherwise, if it wasn't spinning, how would it compact them into what it is? Now, there's scientists on Earth that will that look you in the eye and are really credible people and say the moon is not hollow. It is dense, and it's this dense, and we've measured it, and it goes down 40 kilometers or whatever. So there's solid arguments, a lot more arguments that it's not hollow than it is. I mean, we're just taking little episodes and thinking, hey, it might be, but I think there's more science to it that it's not hollow. But the reason I wanted to philosophize a little bit on it is because how did it form? It's not spinning. So how did all the particles come together? But you brought a good point. I've really, actually, over all my years, I've never heard anybody say that it was spinning before, that it had to be spinning during the explosion. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, it does make a lot of sense. All right. And so it was spinning at one time, probably at a rapid pace, building up, building up, building up until, all the dust settled. Now, if we're going with the collision theory, like you said, think of the moon as a bone. All right. Bone's got caverns through it. It's got tunnels. It's got everything. So maybe it's just a big bone of what Earth used to be. And so, yeah, you're going to have resonation if it's bouncing off everything, and it's got just caverns all over the place, like your bone density. And then once it started, getting pulled into the gravitational pull of the Earth, or, at least mathematically where is now, it's slowed down because maybe it doesn't have a core. So it could just be a bone fragment of Earth, and that's why you got the resonance when something hits. And the other thing is the moon's a perfect artifact because it's got no atmospheric pressure, it's got no water, it's got no earthquake. That's what a planet would look like without anything going on there. So you have the craters that nothing changes the craters. You have craters on there from times that we can't even imagine. And because it has no atmosphere, no wind, no earthquakes, no water flow, it's as if that's a picture of of a lifetime because of all the impacts it has and everything that happened to the moon.
well,
It's never changed.
kind of going back to what your point, Jeff, was. I think it was, if I read it correctly, 2009, where they actually shot something into a crater. What they wanted to do was create a high impact to see if there was water on the moon, okay? And
Yeah,
what it did was when that impact occurred, the whole idea was to send particles as high up into space as possible so that the scientists could kind of read what some of these particles, and they actually did discover that there's actually water on the moon, okay, probably most likely frozen because of its
right,
condition. um, but the whole kind of one of the things that they were looking at was, if there is water on the moon, A, could it help sustain humanity if we put a base up there? Secondly, you can utilize water as not only a resource for humanity, you can use it also as an energy source. So essentially create shuttle further, gas or power for a shuttle by breaking down the water. And let's
right.
let's be honest, we know that the Chinese want to get up there real bad because they're assuming that there are rare earth materials or minerals,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
but in order for them to get up there, you can't just rely on humanity constantly sending up shipments for what they need. That was the whole kind of, because essentially it's my understanding they, if they're going to go to Mars, they want to take off from the moon, not from
right.
Earth, because it'll be a lot easier to do so, take less power. So um, so I think that that's fascinating that if there is a little bit of water left, again, that could have been water from early creation of Earth, or it could be frozen, pieces coming in. Like you said, there's all these craters. Are there essentially meteorites coming from other galaxies, from our own galaxy, that are bringing water or frozen chemicals with it?
Right. Yeah, and you're right. I did read the article. It was in one of the craters that it was all ice. And that means that water is sustainable on the moon, as you said. And yeah, it makes sense to me that if one of these asteroids or like a meteorite, because there's a lot of ice coming from those, that some of that ice survived in the crater. And because it has such a wild temperature range there that it gets so cold that, yeah, there is frozen liquid there that is essentially water. But yeah, I did read that, and I know everybody wants to mine the moon or get a base up there for a hopping point. But going back to the hollow moon, like I said, there's caverns, and probably a lot. It's probably a lot more hollow than the Earth is. And yeah, you would have seismic, you know, picking up all the resonance just from pinging for going through all these caverns for such a long period of time. So that's I don't think it's completely hollow. I don't think it's like an alien base. It's just almost as if it was like a fragment, like a bone from Earth, perhaps.
Like a skull, essentially,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
skull, right?
Mhm.
And,
yeah,
I like that. And as far as creation, I mean, I guess science would essentially teach us, if you watch how stars are born, stars generally are born from the death of other stars, right? The death of other stars essentially shoots out all sorts of particles and gases and whatnot. And over billions of years, these particles, kind of the forces of physics and everything, and gravity starts pulling this stuff together. I think essentially that's what happened. I think, Earth was here. We got struck by another body. Where that body came from, I couldn't tell you. Could it be one of the They talk about the asteroid belt, right? Are some of those asteroids? I don't think they're quite as big as the moon, but you got some big boys over in that asteroid, right? It
yeah,
takes one piece nailing another one to essentially start shooting it around our, galaxy. So, but what I'm getting to is essentially, over hundreds of millions of years, I would guess billions of years, you have all this debris in our, essentially, in our gravity, going around Earth. And over time, I think just like a star's born, you're bringing this matter together and eventually over time it creates this moon. And I do think, Jeff, that it I think you probably brought up the best. It's kind of like bone matter of Earth, essentially. It never was going to get all of the things from trees growing, or anything that has to do with life or anything. It would never have that to kind of create layers. So I think, it just doesn't really have a skin, I guess, would be a fair way to say it.
A couple things from your guys's uh, facts there was, um, if the moon stops spinning and it's orbiting the Earth, we can probably expect the Earth to stop spinning and keep orbiting the sun. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think all
Yeah.
things happen
I
about
do.
the same?
I think at some
And
point,
and boy,
yes.
would that be a suntan if one side of the Earth faced the sun all the time on its
Well, think about it.
rotating
Life
around.
life would be unsustainable on the opposite side, right? You need the sun for agriculture. You need the sun for temperature control.
We'd have a dark side of the Earth.
Yeah. And yeah,
Uh,
and then I don't think would life sustain itself on the side that faces the sun. I mean,
Yeah, that would be hot. You'd have a Goldilocks zone on Earth now, like
yeah.
right
yeah,
in between the dark side and the sun side. And
and
so,
imagine
yeah, that
if
would
the Big
wipe
Bang
out a lot of life.
Imagine if the Big Bang Theory is true and this is an expanding universe and we're in the middle of an explosion. Think of the microsecond that is our existence, human existence, not just our lives, the 10,000, 20,000 years that, humans have been stomping around. That's during an explosion. And so imagine the time that it took all these planets to get in place, moons to be formed. Um, the time, it's unfathomable how long ago it was, which kind of leads me back to what we were talking about last episode. How can we possibly think we were the first ones, first people here? There had to be iterations and iterations and iterations of things existing on the earth. From dinosaurs was one of them. Um, but you know what I mean? Just the time you're talking about. I mean, we're not even a grain of sand in that time.
No.
The time is so immense. It's really mind-boggling to me.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we kind of talk about what the moon means to the Earth and what it means to the life of Earth. When we have an eclipse, luckily we had one a couple years ago that went right through Cleveland, right? And I was blessed to be able to see it. And boy, I got to tell you, I could fully understand if an eclipse occurred in early humanity where they would have absolutely thought that life was coming to an end, that God
Yeah.
was immensely coming. And the one thing I noticed was how quiet it got during the eclipse. And I'm talking the animals. They just
Yeah.
went completely silent, from insects to birds to even our dogs. I mean, they just everything seemed quiet and different, right? Like very still all of a sudden. And so, you can completely understand. And, from a life standpoint, and time going on, Wendell, I had watched, I think it was an Expedition Unknown recently. I think it was last season, where they talked about, are you guys familiar with Ubekli Tepe
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Turkey?
Yep.
And they talked about how that one area right there, that first one that they discovered, because they're working on a second one, by the way, but that first one showed that their earliest theories of humanity were completely wrong, because they saw that one site had been in formation and in use for 3,000 years. They said basically it would equate from the time of the pyramids were built all the way through the 1990s. But in one area, that shelter
Yeah.
was
Yep.
there for 3,000 years. And it showed that humans were coming together sooner than they had anticipated, that because, before the whole theory was that we just kind of were nomads and roamed, and that we couldn't have big societies together because if you did, you didn't have enough agriculture and all that to sustain life. But Ubekle Tepe showed them that that's not true. That now they're not saying that was a huge population there, but they're saying that was definitely an important part of their early society, and it was way
Right.
before the pyramids.
Now, like you were saying, Wendell, I mean, we're not the first, and yeah, there's been civilizations that rise and fall and stuff like that. But, the moon's, like I said in the monologue, there was, it was worship. The moon was worshipped as a god. There was omens about the moon. So the early astrologers, that looked up, I mean, the moon plays a whole lot of, it plays a lot of like on our water and our tidal systems and stuff, and just a little bit off, and we're all flooded. So I'm sure, at some point in time, maybe it rotated faster, maybe it was closer, farther, and, you had a civilization, and the tidal waves came, and there's the ancient flooding. So that whole civilization and everything they knew was wiped out, and we're still finding, fragments of a civilization unknown in the oceans. But it's always Earth is always changing geologically, and I think the moon plays a lot on, with that role as well. So I don't know. I don't really know how far back you could say that humanity goes, but it seems that we get to a certain apex and
Uh,
then everything's lost.
yeah, I think I lean towards it's God's perfection. The moon's there. It's God's perfection. It's perfect, which leads me to my next question. Do you think we should be fooling around with the moon if it's so perfect that it works for us? Should we be fooling around? Steve mentioned bases on it to go other places as jumping points. Um, do you really think we should be excavating the moon?
Here's what I would say. I would say it's inevitable. Wendell, our species, humanity, we've dug into a lot of, I mean, the whole premise of Jurassic Park is built, right? Didn't he say, just because we can, we never ask the question, should we, right? And so I think it's interesting. I think it's inevitable. I think, look, we can have arguments whether or not we actually been there. And personally, I believe we have. But listen, I think there's an argument to be made the opposite way, right? But I think it's inevitable. I think if we truly want to become a species that is going to make it off planet Earth, I think we have to use the moon as essentially a playground for and a camping ground for other places to go. They kind of divide species of humanity or essentially and in essence of how their technology is, right? We always assume that if aliens exist, right, that they're coming from other planets or whatnot. So that means they must be way more sophisticated, which tells us that we're still in kind of the infant phase of humanity because essentially we have a tough time getting off our own rock. So I think should we? That's a good question, Wendell. I honestly, but I think it's inevitable. I think as we continue to develop, we are going to create better technology, and I think we're never going to ask the question, should we? Wendell, I don't think we will. I think it's when, how, and how quickly, because that's just the type of species we are, right?
Mhm.
Now, the way I think about that is God created perfection. The one thing he didn't say was go out and don't go out and explore and don't ask questions, So as a species, there is a connection to explore all his beauty, his wonders. And that's why I mean we got like real I think God is like got the highest mathematics possible. Everything's like perfect. But he didn't say, don't go out and explore everything that I did. Um, do I think we should mess with the moon? I think the moon's like Earth. It'll take care of itself. Do I believe that we should do interplanetary like exploration? That's not something for me to decide. I mean, go out and do it. I don't know if it's going to be to the detriment of whoever goes out and does that said thing. But I know outside of Earth, we don't have oxygen. You need oxygen to survive. It doesn't mean humanity won't come up with like a creation where it's self-contained and oxygen is made out of something else, so on and so forth. But he never said don't explore. So, I mean, I don't see what the big deal of not going there and putting something on the moon. But it's like I said, it's either going to be for the benefit of humanity or it's going to be a detriment. That's all I could say about that one.
I have a hypothetical on it. Behind door number 3, if you believe, not saying I do, just a hypothetical. If we were placed here and the moon was placed there somehow, and the aliens, some aliens somewhere have something to do with it, right? Maybe their intent is for us not to get off this rock. And you hear a lot of the different alien reports and people that, Billy Meyer's one of them, we gotta stop doing what we're doing. And we always assume that it's nuclear weapons every time. And I think we're so far off, we're not even close. It's not about nuclear weapons destroying the earth in my hypothetical. It's about stop trying to get off the planet. One, you're not meant to go off the planet. We don't want you off the planet. You're kind of our things. We want you down there. And 2, you're going to screw shit up if you go up there and start wobbling the moon around and things. So that's my hypothetical. You always hear, yeah, this race visited us and they said we have to clean up our act. And we always assume we got to clean up pollution and stop nuclear testing. Always. We always, I think that's the guilt trip that we all put on ourselves. We got to be doing something wrong. I mean, you see it in your life every day. You got to be doing something wrong. And so that's what they're talking about. We got to stop doing this on Earth. But maybe they're not talking about Earth. Maybe they're talking about our technology starting to get us off the Earth, and the things that we're going to take our carnage from Earth and take it somewhere else, to the moon or whatever. Because we're going to be humans no matter where we are. So if we go to the moon, we're going to pollute it. If we go to the moon, we're going to leave trash laying around. We're going to do stuff there just like we do on Earth. It's just in us. And so hypothetically, if we were put here, maybe whoever put us here don't want us off the Earth. And it's not necessarily us screwing around to destroy the Earth. It's that if you jump off and you go start doing the same thing you do on Earth on the moon, it's not going to end well. So maybe just a hypothetical, just things that go through my mind when we talk about how perfect things has to be for our existence. And we always assume that we're free. We're free to explore. It is in our DNA. I agree with you. But I think maybe something tries to curb that at some point. But yeah, it may, we may be seeing more of these probes and things, not because we're blasting nuclear weapons off, is that we're getting seriously close to be able to travel beyond this planet. And that might be
All right,
what's concerning.
to jump off that hypothetical, if the Earth was placed here, or we were placed here, and the moon was placed there, and it's a watcher. Say it's a watch station. So that means we're the cosmic aquarium for this race that's watching over us to see what we would do to each other, basically to see who's the apex species that's going to inhabit the earth at some point in time. And to go on as far as a lot of these aliens, if they are coming to Earth and saying, clean up your act, you know, you should do better, we're trying to help you. Maybe you're right. Maybe they're not talking about our technology. Maybe they're talking about our ideology, thinking that we are gods and that we could do whatever we want.
We really don't know
And
our
maybe
place.
they're right. Yeah. And maybe we should, start thinking that way, that we're not God. All right. And our ideology, for some reason, causes us to go to wars, causes us to mass murders, all these shootings going on. It's all due to ideology. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's not nuclear weapons that are going to do us in. It's the ideology behind all this, behind each one of us. Because, if you go into a high school lunchroom, and you just look, everybody sits at a table with people who are like themselves, and what brings them together? I mean, this is the band table, this is uh the sports table, then you got the nerds table, and I don't mean nerds in a bad way because they end up ruling the world at some
Come on.
point in time. Yeah. And then you got, the long hair hippie table, rockers, emo, whatever. What unites everybody? Because that's how humanity is. Our ideology keeps us separated. So that's
Yeah.
my take on that.
Well, Wendell, I like what you said. There is something to be said about what you said, and let me break it down this way. There are too many forces that show that we're not meant to leave Earth, right? We can't breathe out there. We can't survive out there. Everything that we need as a species to survive is actually here, right here on Earth, right? They talk about radiation out there, that our own atmosphere protects us from that radiation. The second that we leave our atmosphere, now we're vulnerable to that. And so I do think that there is something to be said about what you said, Wendell, whether it be forces outside of what we understand or whether it's just purely natural forces of a species born on a planet, and they accustom over time, they develop, and essentially that's their home planet. So that's, because they talk about, like, if humans were to go to another planet that could be much larger, could we even stand up? Because, essentially we'd be a lot heavier, right? Because the force
Mhm.
of gravity. So, I'm, however many pounds here, but on the moon, I'm completely much lighter because of the force of gravity's much less there. So I think there's something to be said, Wendell, whether, like I said, whether it's just a natural thing that occurred over time. But listen, the forces said that humans really aren't supposed to leave Earth for whatever reason.
Well, and if you think let's give credence to we did go to the moon. Let's just assume that we did. We've already left junk behind.
Yeah.
We've already polluted it.
Yeah.
We're humans. We're going to do that. So we've already left. We've already changed the mass of the moon. No matter, it might be infinitesimal or whatever small amount you might call it. But if we've went and we left our junk on the moon, we made it different. It's different than what it was, which worries me. It worries me to mess with the moon personally. When smart people like Elon Musk start getting involved, and you see, yep, we're going to be able to do it someday. It worries me. It worries me just simply, especially when you start talking about drilling on the moon and digging and God, who knows what's going on. But no, that was just a hypothetical that I've had in my brain, You know, because we're so self uh, uh, judging, I guess, that it always has to be. We always look inward like we're faulty. You know, maybe that's from the original sin um, concept that we come out owing a debt. But but I always thought it was kind of strange. Why would, if giving credence again to some aliens visiting, telling us we got to straighten our act up. Boy, they're really, boy, they're nice people coming and telling us to straighten up, not so we don't blow our planet up. But I don't think it's that. I think it's more of, all right, you guys are starting to stretch the boundaries a little bit too much, because we can see the same thing. We can see Elon Musk, and yep, they got a good possibility of going and doing it. And we're humans, and we're going to do the same thing we do here anywhere we go. And so, you know, eventually, if we go to the moon and we colonize it, eventually we're going to weaponize it.
Well, let me ask
Just
you
how
this,
we are.
Wendell. Let's play the devil's advocate on your theory here, okay? When you watch shows like Star Trek and whatnot, right? By
Mhm.
that point in humanitarian evolution, if I remember, and I wasn't the biggest Trekkie, right? But you kind of see the same theory sometimes in Star Wars, that in order, a lot of those species, they're no longer like separated like by countries and stuff like that, right? I think by the time Star Trek is done, you have one Earth, right? We represent the people of Earth, right? Now, for right now, where we're at compared to where we think that Star Trek is, right? There's a lot of years in between that for them to get from where we are now to, and I'm not even talking about the space travel. I'm just talking about the human characteristics and society, how society is, right? How do we know that they don't want us to go out there, but there's just certain smarts that you have to figure out to be able, and I'll give you an example, right? We're not meant to leave Earth because we know life is here, we breathe this atmosphere and all that, right? I was just reading how they discovered a mushroom that eats radiation and turns it into clean energy. They found it over in Russia. They found it, in what's the location that where they had the leak?
Chernobyl?
Yes. They found it in Chernobyl, and they said it's black. It's really dark black, and it eats radiation. And here it is thriving right next to where humans can't. So the theory is that we can't go into space because of radiation. Like humans, we're unable to, and we're not going to develop in time as a species to be able to deal with that radiation. But they're thinking about possibly developing suits that use that mushroom to grow on the suits to block the radiation and eat the radiation of space. So if we want to get to Mars, if we want to sustain life on the moon, that potentially by developing these mushrooms, we can create housing, or essentially it'd be kind of a layer on outside things, whether it be suits and everything. So looking at it now, we're just not evolutionary smart enough. We're just not smart enough yet, because here we are sustained in wars. I mean, look at flying. Flying, we should be so far ahead of where we were. We had the same technology 40, 50 years ago. I argue that the Concorde, we had the best of flying 30 years ago. The Concorde, right? We used to make it from what, New York to London in just a couple hours. And then now flying is awful, right? So what I mean by that theory is that in order to truly become a species that is able to go out and go beyond our moon and go to other planets and all that, we have to change the way we are, which is going to take many more years, and I'm talking well past my lifetime, right? Because we have to change our characteristics. Then we have to become smart enough to develop the actual technology to sustain life outside of Earth, whether it truly be on the moon, whether it be on Mars, whatever that looks like. So maybe the creator's essentially just saying, listen, you're not even close to being ready. Not only are you guys sitting here polluting your world, you don't even have the smarts to even get truly to sustain life outside. But the technology's right there on Earth. If you're smart enough and you come together and truly work on this and fix yourself, you're going to be smart enough eventually to develop that technology like other species have to truly do space travel.
I go off of what you were saying earlier, Steve. The all the forces are against us to leave this planet. And I think they're there for a reason. Myself, the same thing as all the forces are there for us not to live underwater. We're just not built that way. But as humans, we're not content. So we start, and we're very trashy too. We trash things like you were saying, Wendell. We leave so much garbage everywhere. I mean, maybe we're not meant to go out because we're the cosmic trailer
Roaches.
park
We're the
trash.
we're the
Yeah,
cosmic roaches.
right. So if we're not content and actually take care of each other and take care of the resources that we have here and like come together some way and get over ourselves, our egos and stuff, and actually unite in something, then I mean, why go to another planet, like you said, destroy that one as well when we're not content here?
Yeah, I think the point of the exercise is a coexistence because, like Steve said, like in Star Trek, I like Star Trek. I don't like all the communal stuff it is and where it ends up in one government because all that's subjective. It's all, you can unite the whole Earth and the Earth is united. But then you go out and you have the Klingons and you have whatever other species we're in. It's always subjective because there's always something different. It's, you're talking about the whole universe now. So um, coexistence would be great. Everybody being able to coexist peacefully and everything. And I don't even think there's a right answer because Jeff and I did that Unit 731 episode, and I was mad when I did it. I had to edit most of my talking out, Steve. I cussed the whole way through it, and I had to edit most of my most of my talking out because it was embarrassing for one. But then we're espousing and the reason I was mad because we were espousing how important life is, how fragile life is, and how every single life has meaning, no matter what your cause, liberty, freedom, whatever you want to tag onto it. And we were putting life up here, one life. But in the same breath, I was saying, I'm so glad they nuked Japan and stopped the empire. And I watched that and I thought, what a hypocrite. Because here I am espousing how valuable one life is, but it's subjective to me, what I like. I didn't really care about the empire, even though the empire was evil. I didn't care that we killed them. And it was exact opposite of what I was saying before, the sentence before, how fragile and important every life is. But it was okay to me because in my eyes, the less of two evils was killing the empire. Well, we were killing lives when we did. And I watched it and I was like, that's so hypocritical. And I wasn't mad at myself, but I was kind of like, you should have caught that because there's no right answer. The empire had to be stopped. It had to be stopped. So, the, like you said, is there any maybe we need to figure out how to fix Earth and everything's here to do it. God gave us everything to do it. We're not smart enough to even figure that out yet. So cool your engines as far as taking your act over to the next block. How about fixing what you got there first? And, so yeah, everything's so subjective, right and wrong and good and evil and all that. We're going to take our human characteristics wherever we go. And I would think that if somebody's out there, like I said, we've already polluted the moon and we don't think a thing about it. We left things behind. And why do we not think about it? Because that's our cause. That's what we think was good. That's us. We're adventurers. So here we go. And it's okay for us to leave our stuff behind and do whatever we want to do when we're there. But I don't know. I just think sometimes maybe if there are aliens out there and they're telling us, guys, you got to understand you're down there for a reason, and we really
Yeah.
don't need you out here because maybe who knows why. So
I always make the
but
same I always make the argument that as a species, as humans, we are the same people we were 5,000 years ago. The only thing that has changed is technology. Honestly, we still fight wars over religion. We still kill over what we think is valuable, metals, gold, printed money, right?
ideology, yeah.
Ideologies, right? We are still fighting.
Territory.
Yeah, we are still fighting the same wars. Technically speaking, it might be in a different area, but we are still fighting the same wars we were 5,000 years ago. The only thing that's changed over this period of time is the technology that we've created, but we're still doing the same things. We're still, we're still doing literally the same characteristics. The only things that's changed is technology, our languages. And honestly, other than that, think about it. We literally are
And
the
if you're
same.
if you're the creator and you've been watching us for 100,000 years, and you notice all those things you just talked about, what are you thinking? If you're, well, I don't think it's going to be a lot longer. They're not figuring it out yet.
I'll tell you
Something
one
like
thing,
that.
Wendell, on your question. If I'm the creator, I'm not going to destroy this. I'm just going to make it harder for us to leave Earth, right? I'm going to say, look, they have a lot more evolutionary long
My
road.
point.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree.
Make it harder.
And talking about the civilization, go back as far as you want, regardless of whether you think it's a young Earth or an old Earth, billions of years that we've been around and civilizations come and gone. Have we learned anything? The crux
We
is
just gotten better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We just gotten better.
I know.
We got better at being
Right.
bad.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We've made
until we
worse
learn
messes.
something. Oh yeah.
By a long shot.
You know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, good talk, guys. I think we squeezed a lot
Yeah.
out of the moon, and like I said, who knows? But it is interesting. The moon is and I think it might be key if we ever found out how it did originate. We would be leaps. I mean, I think things would just connect one after the other.
Well, before we go, I got one last question. Is the moon affects our tidal, or the tides, Since we're 70% water, do you buy into the fact that a full moon truly affects and makes people crazy?
Well, I will say this. I do think it definitely has an effect on humanity because as far as going that far back, think about if you were early man or even middle-aged man, right? You needed the moon. The more moon that is out at night, the better you can travel, the better you could potentially hunt. Your whole humanity changes based on where the moon is and how much light it's given off. And I would imagine if you're a tribe, right? Early Native Americans here in America, obviously we know from the stories they tell how important the moon was. Like you guys said, they worshiped part of it. They made their whole life about it. They moved with it, right? Because they knew over time that this is the time to move. We move with seasons. We move with the cycle of the moon, the cycle of the sun. So I think just based off now, is it like a physical thing? That's a good question. I think it's more of just kind of a learned behavior patterns. We may not move at night based on the moon like we did in the past. Maybe it affects us differently now because of the way we were brought up and how we over time, how that's changed us. But I definitely think that there was an absolute, like, some sort of effect on our mental because of it. Because again, just going back that far, just a couple hundred years ago, they hunted and they, their whole life, everything that they did was part of it was, if they had to live at night, it had to be, you had to have light. You didn't have flashlights. You'd carry torches, but think about it. If you're being hunted, that's kind of a sign to a predator that something food source is moving, right? So what's better? Well, let's travel by the moon because that doesn't give us off to predators, but at the same time, we can see enough to move around. So that's kind of how I would answer that.
My
Because
mine
and and before I go into that, the reason I bring it up in England, at one point in time, there was in courts, if you were brought in for murder, they would throw down the moon made me do it. There was a thing called moon sickness. So I was really wondering, digging a little deeper into how it affects you psychologically, because there are some people that are more sensitive to the gravitational pull of the moon, so their sleep cycles get messed up depending with the moon phases.
I'm with Steve as far it's a light thing, Jeff. I think it's a light thing that there's just more activity on a full moon because there's more light. Look, we're talking about the perfection of the moon and its placement and size and everything. Think about this, the wisdom that we have 12 hours of darkness a day. The wisdom in somebody shutting us down half half the time is amazing. Can you imagine all these lunatics if we had sunlight 24 hours a day and never had darkness? Can you imagine all these lunatics being active and lively all 24 hours of every day? And if they weren't active, some other lunatics were, because it's sunny and 70 all day long. The wisdom in us having a shutdown nighttime is phenomenal as well. It
Yeah,
puts
yeah,
us,
I agree with that.
you put whatever evil or it even ends some good times, when darkness, it even ends, shuts that down for the day. But, the wisdom in that, in us having a shutdown period of darkness also leads me to believe that it was set up by God because it's all just too perfect. But I think,
Right.
back to your question on the moon, I don't know that it's psychological to anybody. I think it's more like to do what you know, to do what you can
Yeah.
or do what you do.
Gotcha. Like you said, great, great show tonight. Great questions, Wendell, Steve. We had fun answering these questions.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Well, with that, thank you all for watching Buried Stories. I'm Jeff Mercurio with Wendell and Steve. If you got any comments, please leave a comment below. Give us your thoughts on the moon. If you got a story you'd like to share and would like to be on the show, just email us at buriedstories74@gmail.com. Until next time, keep digging.